The diner smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams. I'd been on my feet for 11 hours straight, and the fluorescent lights above buzzed like angry wasps, drilling into my skull with each flicker. My sneakers, bought secondhand 3 months ago, had holes in the soles that let in every drop of rainwater from the puddles outside. My feet were numb. My back ached. My tips for the day sat crumpled in my apron pocket, $43 and some change. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. "Emma, table 7 needs a refill." Rita's voice cut through the kitchen noise, sharp and impatient as always. I grabbed the coffee pot, forcing my lips into something resembling a smile as I made my rounds. Table 7. Table 9. The couple by the window who'd been nursing the same cup of coffee for 2 hours. Clearly having nowhere else to go, I understood that feeling more than I cared to admit. The rain had started again, hammering against the windows in sheets that blurred the streetlights outside. It was nearly 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and the diner was almost empty, except for the regulars and the desperate, the people like me who had nowhere better to be. That's when I heard it. A small, hiccuping sob coming from behind the counter. I set down the coffee pot and peered over the edge, my heart immediately clenching at what I saw. A little girl, no more than 5 or 6 years old, sat huddled against the wall. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, soaked from the rain. Her white dress, expensive, I noticed, with delicate embroidery along the hem, was muddy and torn at the knee. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. Huge, brown, terrified eyes that held more fear than any child should ever know. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly, crouching down despite the protest in my knees. "Are you okay?" She looked up at me, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I can't find my papa," she whispered in a small, trembling voice. There was an accent there. Italian, maybe. I was playing, and then he was gone, and I ran. And I don't know where I am. My chest tightened. I knew what it felt like to be lost and alone, though my experience came from a different kind of abandonment. "It's okay. We're going to find him," I promised, reaching out slowly. She didn't flinch away, which I took as a good sign. "What's your name?" "Sophia," she whispered. "Sophia Valentino. Even I, who lived in a one-room apartment in the worst part of the city and avoided the news because it was too depressing, had heard that name. It was whispered in the same breath as words like dangerous and untouchable and mafia. My blood ran cold, but I kept my face calm. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Emma. How about we get you some hot chocolate while we figure out how to find your papa, okay?" She nodded, and I helped her onto one of the counter stools, wrapping my own jacket, threadbare and too thin, but dry, around her small shoulders. Rita shot me a disapproving look from across the diner, but I ignored her. The owner could fire me if he wanted. I wasn't leaving a terrified child alone. I made the hot chocolate extra sweet, the way I wished someone had made things sweet for me when I was young and scared. Sophia wrapped her small hands around the mug, and some color returned to her cheeks. "Do you know your papa's phone number?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "I'm not supposed to answer phones. Papa says bad people try to call, of course. A child of someone like Valentino wouldn't have normal access to phones." "Does your papa have people with him? Guards, maybe?" "Marco," she said suddenly, her eyes lighting up. "Marco is always with Papa, but I ran away from Marco when I saw the puppy, and then I couldn't find anyone, and—" Her voice cracked again. "Shh. It's okay," I soothed, rubbing her back. "We'll find them. Do you remember where you were before you got lost?" The tall building with the gold doors. Papa had a meeting. There were only a few buildings in this area that matched that description. I grabbed the diner's old phone from behind the counter and dialed 911, keeping my voice low as I explained the situation. The operator's tone changed immediately when I mentioned the name Valentino. "Stay where you are," she said urgently. "Do not take the child anywhere. Keep her safe. Someone will be there very soon." The line went dead. I looked at Sophia, who had chocolate on her upper lip and was starting to look drowsy. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion. "Your papa will be here soon," I told her softly. She reached out and grabbed my hand with both of hers, so small and trusting. "You're nice," she murmured. "Like an angel. Papa says angels watch over us." Something in my chest cracked open. Something I'd kept carefully locked away for years. "You're very sweet, Sophia." 15 minutes later, the diner door burst open with such force that the bell above it didn't jingle, it screamed. 3 men in black suits entered first, moving with the kind of precision that spoke of military training. Their eyes scanned every corner, every person, every shadow. One of them spoke rapidly into a radio, words I couldn't quite catch. The other diners, sensing danger the way animals sense predators, fell silent. Then he walked in. Time seemed to slow, the air growing thick and heavy like honey. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his black suit in a way that suggested both money and power. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, lips set in a hard line. But it was his eyes that held me frozen. Dark, impossibly dark, and currently filled with something between fury and fear. Those eyes swept across the diner and landed on Sophia. "Papa!" she cried out, scrambling off the stool and running to him. He dropped to one knee, a controlled, fluid movement, and caught her in his arms, pressing her against his chest with a kind of desperate intensity that made my throat tight. He murmured something in Italian, rapid and low, his hand cradling the back of her head. For a moment, the dangerous man in the expensive suit disappeared, and there was only a father holding his found child. Then his eyes lifted and found mine. The impact of that gaze hit me like a physical force. There was assessment there, calculation, and something else I couldn't name, something that made my skin prickle with awareness. He stood slowly, Sophia still in his arms, and began walking toward me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. I was suddenly, painfully aware of my stained uniform, my messy ponytail, the hole in my left sneaker. I was nothing, invisible in a way I'd perfected over the years. But under his gaze, I felt exposed, seen in a way that was both terrifying and strangely intoxicating. He stopped in front of the counter, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Expensive, dark, with notes of cedar and something sharper, more dangerous. One of his men moved to take Sophia, but he held up a hand, stopping them. He didn't take his eyes off me. "You kept my daughter safe," he said. His voice was deep, with that same Italian accent Sophia had, but smoother, more controlled. It wrapped around me like silk hiding a blade. Yes, of course. Anyone would have, I stammered, hating how small my voice sounded. "No," he said softly, and somehow that quiet word held more weight than a shout. "Not anyone. Not in this city. Not with my name." He paused, his dark eyes roaming over my face with an intensity that made my cheeks heat. "What is your name?" "Emma. Emma Parker." He repeated it slowly, as if tasting each syllable. "Emma." The way he said it, with that accent, made it sound like something more than just a name. "I am Dante Valentino, and I owe you a debt." Before I could respond, before I could process what that meant, Sophia lifted her head from his shoulder and pointed at me. "She gave me hot chocolate, Papa, and her jacket. She's an angel." Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "Yes," he said quietly, still looking at me. "Perhaps she is." One of his men stepped forward, holding out something. A business card, I realized, pure black with silver lettering, just a name and a phone number. "If you ever need anything," Dante said, his voice dropping even lower, "you call this number. Day or night, anything at all." I took the card with shaking fingers. It felt heavy, like it carried weight beyond paper and ink. "Thank you," I whispered, not sure what else to say. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that felt oddly formal, and turned to leave. But then he paused, looking back over his shoulder. "Emma Parker," he said again, as if committing it to memory. "I do not forget those who protect what is mine." There was a promise in those words, or perhaps a warning. I couldn't tell which. They left as quickly as they'd arrived, a small army of dangerous men surrounding one little girl and her father. Through the rain-streaked window, I watched them climb into a convoy of black SUVs with tinted windows. As the vehicles pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of Dante Valentino through the rear window. He was watching me. The diner erupted into noise the moment they were gone. Rita demanding to know what had happened, other waitresses bombarding me with questions, customers whispering about the Valentino family. But I couldn't focus on any of it. I stood there, staring at the black card in my hand, my heart racing for reasons I didn't want to examine. I should have thrown it away, should have forgotten this ever happened. Men like Dante Valentino were dangerous in ways that went beyond the obvious violence everyone whispered about. They consumed people, swallowed them whole, and left nothing behind but shadows. But I didn't throw the card away. Instead, I slipped it into my pocket, right next to my pathetic tips, and felt it burn against my hip like a brand. I didn't know it then, but my life had just changed in ways I couldn't possibly imagine. The invisible waitress had been seen by the most dangerous man in the city, and men like Dante Valentino didn't simply forget. They possessed, they claimed, they destroyed. And as I finished my shift and walked home through the rain-soaked streets, that black card felt like a key, not to freedom, but to a cage I hadn't even known existed. A cage made of silk and steel, luxury and violence, protection and possession. I should have been terrified. Instead, some dark, hungry part of me whispered, "Finally, someone sees me." That thought should have been my first warning. It wasn't. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, the sharp angles of his jaw, the way his eyes had held mine like he was memorizing every detail, cataloging my existence in some mental file I'd never escape from. The card sat on my nightstand, a small rectangle of darkness that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat in the shadows of my cramped room. My apartment was a joke, a single room with a hot plate, a bathroom so small I could touch both walls at once, and windows that rattled with every gust of wind. The building smelled like mildew and desperation, and the couple next door fought every night with a predictability that had become almost comforting. At least their chaos was familiar. This feeling coiling in my chest was not. I got up at 5:30, like always, and went through my morning routine on autopilot. Shower in lukewarm water because the building's hot water was rationed. Coffee made from grounds I'd used twice already. The same tired reflection staring back at me from the cracked bathroom mirror. Mousy brown hair, pale skin, shadows under gray eyes that had stopped hoping for better things years ago. I was nobody. Nothing, exactly how I'd learned to survive. So why couldn't I stop thinking about the way Dante Valentino had looked at me like I was something worth remembering? The morning shift at the diner dragged. Rita was in a mood, snapping at everyone, and the coffee maker broke around 9, which meant hand brewing every single cup. My feet hurt worse than usual, probably because I'd barely slept. The lunch rush came and went in a blur of orders and false smiles. I was clearing table 12 when the diner door opened, and the entire atmosphere changed. Not him, not Dante Valentino himself, but the man who entered carried the same aura of controlled danger. He was shorter, stockier, with graying hair and a scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his cheek. He wore a suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, and his eyes, cold, assessing, found me immediately. He walked straight to me, ignoring Rita's attempt to greet him. "Emma Parker," he said, not a question. My throat went dry. "Yes." "Marco Russo." He pulled out a chair at the nearest table, sitting without waiting for an invitation. "Sit." It wasn't a request. I glanced at Rita, who looked like she wanted to object, but wisely kept her mouth shut. I sat. Mr. Valentino wanted me to deliver this personally. He slid an envelope across the table. Thick, cream-colored paper. Expensive. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Inside was a check, and when I saw the amount, the world tilted sideways. $50,000. "I can't," I started, trying to push it back across the table. "You can. And you will." Marco's voice was flat, brooking no argument. "Mr. Valentino doesn't like owing debts. You kept his daughter safe. This is the beginning of his gratitude." The beginning. Those words sent ice down my spine. "There's more," Marco continued, pulling out another envelope. "An invitation. Mr. Valentino requests your presence at dinner tomorrow night. 7 o'clock. A car will pick you up from your address. He paused, and something that might have been amusement flickered in his cold eyes. I took the liberty of verifying your information. You understand. Security concerns. Of course they'd investigated me. Found out everything. Where I lived, where I worked, probably my entire pathetic history laid out like evidence at a crime scene. I don't think... It's not a request, Miss Parker. Marco stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. Mr. Valentino doesn't extend invitations lightly. To refuse would be... He let the sentence hang, unfinished but heavy with implication. Unwise. He left before I could respond, moving through the diner like a shark through water, everyone instinctively moving out of his path. I stared at the check in my shaking hands. $50,000. Enough to move out of my hellhole apartment. Enough to pay off debts. Enough to change my life, but nothing was ever free, especially not from men like Dante Valentino. Rita appeared at my elbow, her eyes wide. Emma, what the hell was that about? I don't know, I whispered. But that was a lie. I knew exactly what it was about. I'd caught the attention of a predator, and now he was circling. The next 24 hours passed in a fog of anxiety and something else. Something I didn't want to name. I deposited the check, half expecting it to bounce, but it cleared immediately. $50,000 appeared in my account like magic, like a fairy tale, like a trap. I tried to tell myself I could refuse the dinner invitation, that I could simply not be there when the car arrived. But Marco's words echoed in my head. Unwise. And beneath the fear, beneath the rational voice screaming at me to run, there was something else. A dark curiosity, a hunger I'd buried so deep I'd almost forgotten it existed. When had anyone last looked at me the way Dante Valentino had? When had I last felt seen, wanted, like I mattered? Never. The answer was never. So when 6:30 came, I found myself standing in front of my pathetic closet, staring at clothes that were all wrong for dinner with a mafia boss. Everything I owned was cheap, worn, or stained from the diner, nothing appropriate for whatever world Dante Valentino inhabited. At 6:45, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find a woman in her 50s, elegant and composed, holding several garment bags. Miss Parker? Mr. Valentino thought you might need assistance. Her smile was kind but knowing. I'm Maria. May I come in? I stepped aside, feeling like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. Maria worked efficiently, laying out dresses on my bed, actual designer dresses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Mr. Valentino wasn't sure of your size, so I brought options, she said, her accent similar to his. He has excellent taste, though. These will look beautiful on you. I can't accept these, I protested weakly. Of course you can, dear. Mr. Valentino insists. She held up a dress in deep emerald green, simple but elegant, with a neckline that suggested rather than revealed. Try this one. It will bring out your eyes. I felt like a doll being dressed, but Maria's matter-of-fact efficiency left no room for argument. The dress fit perfectly, too perfectly, which meant they'd somehow gotten my exact measurements. The thought should have terrified me more than it did. Maria did my hair and makeup with professional skill, transforming me from invisible waitress to someone I barely recognized. The woman in the mirror had smoky eyes, lips painted the color of wine, hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. There, Maria said with satisfaction. Beautiful. The car is waiting downstairs. My heart hammered against my ribs as I descended the stairs in heels I'd never have chosen for myself. Black, elegant, probably designer like everything else. The other residents of my building stared openly as I passed. I didn't blame them. I looked like an imposter in my own skin. The car waiting outside was a black Mercedes, sleek and obviously armored. The driver opened the door without a word, and I slid into the back seat onto leather that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe had before tonight. We drove through the city, leaving behind the broken streets of my neighborhood and entering areas I'd only seen on television. The buildings grew taller, cleaner, more expensive with each passing block. The people on the sidewalks wore clothes that cost more than I made in a month. We stopped in front of a restaurant I'd heard of but never dreamed of entering, La Stella, where reservations required months of waiting and connections I'd never have. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out onto the sidewalk, feeling exposed and terrified. "Miss Parker." Another suited man appeared, younger this time, with watchful eyes. "This way, please." He led me through a side entrance, avoiding the main dining room, down a hallway decorated with paintings that were probably originals. We stopped at a door, and he knocked twice before opening it. The private dining room was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a single table set for two with candles and white roses, soft music playing from hidden speakers. Everything was elegant, expensive, controlled. And standing by the window, silhouetted against the city lights, was Dante Valentino. He turned as I entered, and I watched his eyes move over me slowly, taking in every detail of the transformation. Something flashed in those dark depths. Approval, possession, hunger. He dismissed the guard with a slight gesture, and suddenly we were alone. "Emma," he said, my name rolling off his tongue like a prayer or a curse. "You look exquisite." I couldn't find my voice. He moved toward me, each step measured and predatory, until he was close enough that I could smell that same cologne. Cedar and danger. He took my hand, his fingers warm and calloused in a way that suggested he wasn't just a man who gave orders, but one who knew how to use his hands. He pressed his lips to my knuckles, his eyes never leaving mine. "Thank you for accepting my invitation." Did I have a choice? The words escaped before I could stop them. A smile curved his lips, dangerous and amused. "There is always a choice, Bella. You chose to be here. That interests me." He led me to the table, pulling out my chair with old-world courtesy that felt surreal. A waiter appeared immediately with wine, probably worth more than my monthly salary, and poured with practiced silence before disappearing. "You're afraid of me," Dante observed, settling into his chair with the casual grace of a man completely comfortable with power. "But you came anyway." "Why?" "You sent Marco with a message that made it clear refusal wasn't advisable." "Marco." He sighed, swirling his wine. "He can be direct. But I give you my word, Emma. You could have refused, and no harm would have come to you. I wanted you here, but not by force." "Then why am I here?" I asked, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for my own wine glass. His eyes held mine, and the intensity there stole my breath. "Because 2 nights ago I experienced every father's worst nightmare. My daughter was missing, and for 23 minutes, I didn't know if she was alive or dead. 23 minutes of pure hell." He paused, and something raw flickered across his face. "And then I found her, safe and warm, drinking hot chocolate with a woman who asked for nothing in return. A woman who looked at Sophia like she mattered, not like a pawn or a tool or a liability." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping lower. "Do you know how rare that is in my world, Emma? Genuine kindness with no agenda?" "I'm not special," I whispered. "Anyone would have—" "No." The word was sharp, final. "Not anyone. Not in this city, not with my name attached. You did something remarkable, and now I find myself curious about you." The way he said curious made heat pool low in my stomach. A feeling I hadn't experienced in so long I'd almost forgotten what it was. "The money," I started, "is nothing. A drop in an ocean. I could give you 10 times that amount and never notice." He studied me over the rim of his glass. "But that's not what you need, is it? What do I need?" The question came out breathier than I intended. His smile was slow, predatory. "To be seen. To matter. To be more than invisible." He set down his glass, his gaze never wavering. "I see you, Emma Parker, every detail. The way you bite your lip when you're nervous. The shadows under your eyes that speak of sleepless nights and endless worry. The strength in your spine despite the exhaustion. The kindness you showed my daughter even though you were clearly terrified." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. He was right. About all of it. "I want to offer you something," he continued, his voice wrapping around me like smoke. "A position. Not as a waitress, but as Sophia's companion. She needs someone kind, someone genuine, someone she trusts. and she trusts you. I'm not qualified. You kept her safe and made her smile in the midst of trauma. That's the only qualification that matters." He leaned back, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "The salary would be generous. You'd live in my home, have your own suite. All expenses covered. You'd spend time with Sophia, teaching her, playing with her, being the gentle presence she needs." It sounded too good to be true, because it was. "And what do you get out of this?" I asked, surprised by my own boldness. His smile widened, showing teeth. "Access. To you, your time, your presence." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I'm not going to lie to you, Emma. I find you intriguing, and I'm a man who takes what he wants. But I'm also a man of patience. Say yes, and you'll have everything you need. Safety, security, comfort. All I ask is that you be yourself." "This is crazy," I whispered. "Perhaps. But you haven't said no." He was right. I should have been running for the door, should have been screaming about how insane this was. But instead, I sat there, caught in his dark eyes, feeling the pull of something dangerous and irresistible. "Why me?" I asked finally. "You could have anyone, because everyone else wants something from me. Power, money, status, protection." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "But you, Emma Parker. You looked at my daughter and saw a scared little girl who needed help. Not a tool, not leverage, just a child. That kind of genuine heart is rare, precious." He stood, moving around the table with that liquid grace, and extended his hand. "Come." I took it without thinking, his hand warm and strong, engulfing mine. He led me to the window, standing behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body against my back. "Look at this city," he murmured near my ear, sending shivers down my spine. "Everything you see could be yours. Safety, luxury, a life where you never have to worry about rent or food or holes in your shoes. All I'm offering is a chance at something better." His reflection in the window glass was dark and powerful, and mine, in this dress with this makeup, looked like someone who belonged in his world. But reflections were lies, weren't they? Tricks of light and glass. "I need time to think," I managed. "Of course." But his hand settled on my waist, possessive and warm. "Take tonight. Tomorrow I'll send a car at noon. If you get in, you accept my offer. If you don't..." He paused. "Well, I'll be disappointed, but I'll respect your choice." He turned me to face him, his hands on my shoulders, his eyes burning into mine. "But know this, Emma. The moment you step into my world, you're mine to protect, mine to care for. Mine." The last word was almost a growl. "No one will hurt you. No one will touch you. You'll want for nothing, but you'll be mine." "That sounds like a cage," I whispered. His thumb brushed my cheek, perhaps, and I hated how I leaned into the touch. But even cages can be beautiful. And some birds, Emma, need protection from the world outside. The question is, do you want to keep flying alone, exhausted, always one moment from falling? Or do you want to land somewhere safe, even if it means accepting limits? I should have said no, should have walked away, but his words found every weak spot in my armor, every tired bone in my body, every lonely night I'd endured. The dinner that followed was surreal. Courses I couldn't name, wine that tasted like silk, conversation that ranged from Sophia's favorite books to my childhood dreams I'd forgotten I had. He listened like every word mattered, his eyes never leaving my face, making me feel like the only person in the world. When the car dropped me back at my building at midnight, I climbed the stairs in a daze. The dress felt like Cinderella's gown. Beautiful but borrowed, a fantasy that would dissolve at dawn. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about his offer, about the way he looked at me, about the cage he'd promised, beautiful but confining. At 11:45 the next morning, I stood at my window, watching the street below. At noon exactly, a black Mercedes pulled up to my building. My heart hammered. My hands shook. Every rational thought screamed at me to stay inside, to let the car leave, to choose freedom over comfort. But I thought about holes in my shoes and cold showers and endless invisible days stretching before me. I thought about the way Dante's eyes had held mine like I mattered. I thought about little Sophia saying I was an angel. I grabbed my purse and walked down the stairs. The driver opened the door, his face impassive. I hesitated for one last moment, standing on the edge of a decision that would change everything. Then I got in. The door closed behind me with a soft final click, the sound of a cage locking or a sanctuary opening. I couldn't tell which. And as the car pulled away from everything I'd known, heading toward a future I couldn't predict, I caught a glimpse of Dante Valentino's reflection in the rearview mirror. He was watching from a building across the street, his phone to his ear, his eyes following my every movement. He'd known I would say yes. Somehow he'd known. And that knowledge settled over me like a silk rope. Soft, beautiful, and utterly inescapable. The Valentino estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a palace. The car had driven for nearly 40 minutes, leaving the city behind and winding through hills where homes sat behind gates and walls, each more impressive than the last. But Dante's property dwarfed them all. The gate alone was 15 feet high, wrought iron embedded with security cameras that tracked our approach. Armed guards in discreet positions watched as we passed through, their eyes hidden behind sunglasses, even though clouds covered the afternoon sky. The main house rose before us like something from a different era, Italian Renaissance architecture with modern security, honey-colored stone and bulletproof windows, manicured gardens and guard towers hidden among the trees. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The car stopped at the front entrance, where marble steps led to massive double doors. Marco waited there, his scarred face impassive as he opened my door. "Miss Parker, welcome." He gestured toward the entrance. "Mr. Valentino is waiting in his office. I'll show you to your quarters first." I followed him inside, my heels clicking on floors that looked like they cost more than my entire apartment building. The entrance hall soared 3 stories high, with a chandelier that sparkled like captured starlight and paintings that belonged in museums. Everything screamed wealth, power, permanence. I'd stepped into another world entirely. Marco led me up a curved staircase, down a hallway lined with more art, past doors I couldn't begin to count. We stopped at the end of the hall, and he opened a door that revealed a suite bigger than my entire previous apartment. "Your rooms," Marco said simply. I stepped inside, unable to process what I was seeing. A sitting area with plush furniture and another chandelier. A bedroom with a bed so large it seemed ridiculous, covered in silk sheets the color of cream. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens that stretched for acres. A bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people and a shower with more jets than I could count. "Your clothes have been delivered and put away," Marco continued, walking to the closet and opening it to reveal an entire wardrobe I hadn't owned this morning. "If you need anything adjusted or prefer different styles, Maria will arrange it. Dinner is at 7. Mr. Valentino requests you join him in his office at 4 o'clock. That gives you 2 hours to settle in." He left before I could respond, the door clicking shut with a finality that made my chest tight. I stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by luxury I'd never imagined, and felt more trapped than I ever had in my tiny apartment. At least there, I'd been invisible. Here, I was visible in a way that made my skin crawl with awareness, like I was a butterfly pinned under glass. Beautiful, and utterly unable to fly. I explored the suite like a prisoner learning her cell. The closet held dozens of dresses, casual clothes, shoes that actually fit perfectly. The bathroom had products I'd only seen in magazines. The sitting area had books, real books, leather-bound and expensive. Someone had studied me, learned my sizes, my preferences, maybe even my habits. It should have felt like a gift. Instead, it felt like surveillance. At 3:45, I changed into one of the simpler dresses. Deep blue, modest, the kind of thing that might make me feel less exposed. I brushed my hair, avoiding my own eyes in the mirror because I didn't want to see what was there. Fear? Anticipation? Hunger for this life I couldn't afford to want. At 4 o'clock exactly, there was a soft knock on my door. A young woman stood there, maybe 19 or 20, with kind eyes and a maid's uniform. "Miss Parker, I'm Anna. I'll show you to Mr. Valentino's office." I followed her through the maze of hallways, down another staircase, past rooms I glimpsed but didn't understand, a library, a formal dining room, what looked like a ballroom. The house was enormous, and I realized with a sinking feeling that I could get lost here easily. Perhaps that was intentional. We stopped at a door made of dark wood, and Anna knocked twice before opening it. "Miss Parker, sir." "Thank you, Anna." Dante's voice came from inside, and Anna stepped aside to let me enter. The office was what I'd expected, masculine, powerful, dominated by a massive desk made of dark wood. But what caught my attention were the photographs on the walls. Sophia at various ages, laughing and playing. Sophia as a baby in someone's arms, a woman I couldn't quite see. Sophia with Dante, his expression so soft it transformed his entire face. "She's my world," Dante said from behind me, and I turned to find him watching me study the photos. He'd removed his suit jacket, his white shirt rolled up at the sleeves, revealing forearms that were surprisingly muscular. "The only pure thing in my life, her mother?" I asked, gesturing to the partially visible woman in one photo. His expression shuddered immediately, darkness falling over his features like a curtain. "Dead. 4 years ago." The words were clipped, final, allowing no further questions. He moved to a bar cart in the corner, pouring amber liquid into 2 glasses. "Whiskey? Or would you prefer something else? I don't usually drink in the afternoon." "Ah, but this isn't a usual afternoon, is it?" He handed me a glass anyway, his fingers brushing mine deliberately. "You've just moved into a mafia boss's home. I think that warrants a drink." I took a sip to have something to do with my hands. The whiskey burned, smooth and expensive, warming my chest. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. I obeyed, and he settled into his own chair, watching me over the rim of his glass. "You're terrified. Should I not be? Probably. But I want you to understand something, Emma." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You're safer here than you've ever been in your life. My home is protected by the best security money can buy. My men are trained and loyal. Nothing happens here without my knowledge and permission. You're under my protection now, and that means something in this world." "Protection from what?" His smile was grim. "From everyone who would hurt you to get to me. From my enemies. From anyone foolish enough to think they can touch what's mine." He paused. "And from me, if necessary." "I won't touch you, Emma. Not unless you ask me to." The way he said it made heat curl low in my belly. A promise and a challenge wrapped together. "Your role here is simple," he continued. "Spend time with Sophia. She needs normalcy, kindness, someone who sees her as a child and not as the Valentino heir. You'll have breakfast with her, play with her, read to her. Whatever she needs. The rest of your time is your own. That's it? That's it." He stood, moving around the desk with that predatory grace. "Though I'd be lying if I said I didn't hope you'd also spend time with me. I find your company compelling." He was close now, standing in front of my chair, looking down at me with eyes that saw too much. I should have stood, created distance, but I felt paralyzed, a rabbit caught in a wolf's gaze. "I have rules, Emma. Simple ones, but absolute." His voice dropped lower, more intimate. "You don't leave the property without security. You don't speak to anyone about my business. You don't go into the East Wing. That's where I conduct affairs you're better off not knowing about. And you don't trust anyone completely except me and Marco. Understood?" I nodded, my throat too tight for words. "Good." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. "Now, would you like to meet Sophia? She's been asking about her angel since yesterday." Sophia's room was everything a little girl could dream of. Pink and white and gold, with a canopy bed fit for a princess, and more toys than any child could play with. But it was the little girl herself who made my chest ache. She sat on her bed, coloring in a book, and when she looked up and saw me, her entire face lit up like sunshine. "Emma, you came." She launched herself off the bed and ran to me, wrapping her small arms around my waist. "Papa said you might come live with us. Are you really staying?" I knelt down to her level, returning her hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Yes, sweetheart, I'm staying. Forever? I glanced at Dante, who stood in the doorway watching us with an expression I couldn't read. For a while, I said carefully. Yay. Sophia grabbed my hand, pulling me toward her toys. Come see my dollhouse. Papa got it for me from Italy, and it has tiny furniture and everything. For the next 2 hours, I let Sophia pull me into her world. A world of dolls and tea parties and stories that made no sense but were told with such earnest enthusiasm that I couldn't help but smile. She was bright and sweet, and so desperately starved for attention that it broke something inside me. When Anna came to tell us dinner was ready, Sophia insisted on holding my hand the entire way to the dining room. The room was enormous, with a table that could seat 20, but only 3 places were set at one end. Intimate despite the grandeur. Dante waited there, having changed into a fresh shirt, his hair still slightly damp from a shower. He pulled out both chairs for us, Sophia on his right and me on his left, close enough that I could smell his cologne again, that intoxicating mix of cedar and danger. Dinner was surprisingly normal, at least at first. Sophia chattered about her day, and Dante listened with a patience I hadn't expected, asking questions that showed he genuinely cared about every detail. But I felt his eyes on me constantly, watching how I interacted with his daughter, studying me like I was a puzzle he was determined to solve. Emma, Sophia said suddenly, do you have a papa and mama? The question hit me like a physical blow. Dante's eyes sharpened, clearly catching my reaction. No, sweetheart, I said softly. My parents died when I was young. Oh. Sophia's face fell. That's sad. But now you can share my papa. He has enough love for lots of people. Dante's expression softened, and he reached over to ruffle her hair. That's very generous of you, Piccola. After dinner, I helped Sophia get ready for bed, reading her 3 stories because she insisted she couldn't possibly sleep without them. When she finally drifted off, I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her peaceful face, and felt a fierce protectiveness surge through me. I would keep her safe, no matter what. She adores you already. Dante's voice came from behind me, and I turned to find him leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching me with those dark, knowing eyes. I knew she would. She's easy to love. So are you, he said quietly, and the words hung between us like a confession. I should have left, retreated to my room, created boundaries, but instead, I found myself following him to a terrace that overlooked the gardens, the night air cool against my skin. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but here, we were isolated in darkness and luxury. Why did you really bring me here? I asked, gripping the stone railing. The truth. He moved beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. The truth? Because the moment I saw you with my daughter, something in me recognized something in you. You're alone in the world, Emma, just like I am, in many ways. We wear different armor. Yours is invisibility, mine is violence, but underneath, we're the same. We're survivors who've learned to protect ourselves by never letting anyone too close. You don't know me, I whispered. Don't I? He turned to face me, his hand coming up to cup my jaw, tilting my face toward his. I know you've been alone so long you've forgotten what it feels like to be wanted. I know you work yourself to exhaustion because it's easier than thinking about what you've lost. I know you're terrified right now, but you're also intrigued because part of you craves this, being seen, being valued, being claimed. His thumb brushed across my lower lip, and I couldn't help the small gasp that escaped. I know that you want to run, but you also want to stay, and I know that you think I'm dangerous. You're right, but I'm dangerous to my enemies, Emma. Never to you. How can you promise that? My voice was barely a whisper. Because you're mine now. The words were possessive, absolute. And I protect what's mine with everything I have. No one will touch you. No one will hurt you. You'll never be cold or hungry or invisible again. All I ask is that you let me see you. All of you. The broken parts, the scared parts, the parts you hide from everyone else. It was insane. This whole situation was insane. But standing there in the darkness with his hand on my face, his eyes burning into mine. I felt something crack open inside me, something I'd kept locked away for years because it was too painful, too dangerous to want things I couldn't have. "What if I can't give you what you want?" I asked. His smile was slow, predatory, devastating. "Then I'll wait. I'm a patient man, Emma, and you're worth waiting for." He leaned in, his lips brushing my forehead in a gesture that was somehow more intimate than a kiss. "Sleep well, Bella. Tomorrow, your new life truly begins." He left me there on the terrace, my heart racing and my skin burning where he'd touched me. I stood in the darkness for a long time, trying to remember how to breathe, trying to understand what I'd gotten myself into. Inside, through the windows, I could see the house, warm and golden and safe. My room waited for me with its silk sheets and luxury. Sophia slept peacefully in her princess bed. And somewhere in this massive fortress, Dante Valentino moved through shadows, dangerous and powerful and utterly focused on me. I'd entered a cage, but as I finally walked back inside, the warmth of the house enveloping me, I wondered if maybe some cages weren't prisons at all. Maybe some cages were the only place you could finally stop running. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like surrender. The first week passed in a blur of contradictions. Days with Sophia were simple, pure, filled with the kind of innocent joy I'd forgotten existed. We painted pictures that ended up more on us than the paper. We built elaborate block towers just to knock them down. We read stories where princesses saved themselves, and dragons weren't always the villains. She showed me her favorite hiding spots in the gardens. A hollow tree she called her secret castle. A bench hidden behind rose bushes where she could watch the birds. But nights belonged to Dante. He never pushed, never demanded. But he was always there, a dark presence pulling me into his orbit with the inexorable force of gravity. Dinners where his eyes tracked my every movement. Evenings on the terrace where we talked about everything and nothing, his voice wrapping around me like smoke. Casual touches that lingered just a moment too long. His hand at the small of my back, his fingers brushing mine as he passed me a wine glass, the way he'd tuck my hair behind my ear with an intimacy that made my breath catch. I was being hunted, and the terrifying part was that I wasn't sure I wanted to escape. On the 8th day, everything changed. I woke to chaos. Raised voices, car doors slamming, the sound of running feet in the hallway outside my room. My heart hammered as I threw on a robe and opened my door to find Marco striding past, his face harder than usual, a gun visible under his jacket. "What's happening?" I called out. He stopped, turning to me with those cold eyes. "Stay in your room, Miss Parker. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or Mr. Valentino." "Is Sophia safe?" "She's with Mr. Valentino in the secure room. Now lock your door." He was gone before I could ask anything else, disappearing down the stairs with 3 other armed men I'd seen patrolling the grounds. I stood frozen in the hallway, my mind racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. I went back inside, but I didn't lock the door. Instead, I dressed quickly in jeans and a sweater, my hands shaking as I pulled on shoes. If something was wrong, if Sophia needed me, I wasn't going to hide in my room like... A scream cut through the air. Not Sophia. The voice was wrong. Older, female, furious, and afraid in equal measure. I found myself moving before I could think, following the sound down the stairs, through hallways I'd memorized during sleepless nights of exploration. The screaming was coming from the East Wing, the one place Dante had forbidden me to go. I should have turned back, should have listened to his rules, but the scream came again, and something in it made my feet keep moving. The East Wing was different from the rest of the house. Darker, colder, with fewer windows and more doors made of heavy steel. The screaming came from behind one of those doors, and as I got closer, I could make out words. "You can't do this. I have rights. Victor is dead." Dante's voice, cold and flat in a way I'd never heard before. "His rights died with him, and yours are whatever I decide they are." I pressed myself against the wall beside the door, which stood slightly ajar, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. "Please," the woman sobbed now. "Please, I didn't know he was stealing from you. I swear I had no idea." "Your ignorance isn't innocence, Gabriella. Still that terrible, cold voice. You spent the money, wore the jewelry, lived in the penthouse my money paid for while your husband skimmed from my accounts. That makes you complicit. I'll pay it back. Every cent, I swear. With what? Victor's life insurance? A dark laugh. That money came from a policy I paid for. It's already mine. Everything he had was mine, including his debts. Then what do you want from me? The desperation in her voice made my stomach turn. Silence. Then, information. Victor didn't act alone. He was too stupid. Someone told him how to hide the transfers, how to avoid my audits. Give me the name, and I'll let you walk out of here alive. I don't know. I swear on my life. Your life has very little value to me right now, Gabriella, but perhaps... His voice shifted, taking on a considering tone that was somehow worse than the coldness. Perhaps we can find another way for you to pay your debts. Anything, she gasped. Anything, please. There's a club in Prague. They specialize in entertainment. Women with your looks could work off Victor's debt in, 5 or 6 years. If you're smart about it. The woman's scream this time was different. Pure horror and understanding. No, you can't, that's slavery. You can't. I can do whatever I want. Matter of fact, absolute. The question is whether you prefer that option, or whether you'd rather tell me what I want to know. You have 30 seconds to decide. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This was the real Dante Valentino, not the attentive father, not the seductive predator who touched me like I was precious. This was the man whose name made people whisper and cross the street. This was the monster wearing a beautiful mask. I should have run, should have locked myself in my room like Marco said, but my feet were rooted to the spot, and some horrible part of me needed to hear more, needed to understand exactly what kind of cage I'd entered. 20 seconds, Gabriella. I don't know, she sobbed. I'm telling you the truth. Then I guess we're done here. Marco, call our friend in Prague. Tell him I'm sending... Wait! The woman's voice cracked. Wait, please. Victor mentioned someone once, a name. I don't know if it means anything. I'm listening. Russo. He said the name Russo. That someone named Russo taught him how to hide the accounts. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Even through the door, I could feel the shift in Dante's energy, from cold to absolutely frozen. Russo? He repeated softly. Are you certain? Yes. Yes, I swear that's the only name I ever heard. Marco. Dante's voice cut through her words like a blade. Take her to the holding room. She doesn't leave until I verify this information. If she's lying, you know what to do. Wait, you said... I said I'd let you walk out alive if you gave me useful information. I didn't say when. Be grateful I'm not putting a bullet in your head right now for wasting my time with possibilities. Footsteps. Moving toward the door. Toward me. I ran. My shoes were quiet on the carpet, but my breathing was ragged, panicked. I made it to the main hallway, then to the stairs, then to my room, slamming the door behind me and locking it with shaking hands. I stood there, back pressed against the door, trying to process what I'd heard. The coldness in Dante's voice, the casual cruelty, the way he'd threatened to sell a woman into sexual slavery like it was just another business transaction. This was who he really was. This was the truth beneath the expensive suits and gentle touches and promises of protection. And I was living in his house, sleeping in his bed, eating his food, letting him touch me, seduce me, pull me deeper into his world with every passing day. I was such a fool. A knock on my door made me jump, a small scream escaping before I could stop it. Emma. Dante's voice, back to that smooth, cultured tone I'd come to know. Open the door. I'm not feeling well, I called out, hating how my voice shook. I need to rest. Open the door, Emma. Now. The command in his voice sent ice down my spine. He knew. Somehow he knew I'd been there, that I'd heard. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door, stepping back as it opened to reveal him standing there in a fresh shirt, his hair slightly damp as if he'd just washed his hands. Or blood. God. Was that blood I was imagining? He stepped inside. closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a death knell. His eyes swept over me, taking in my pale face, my shaking hands, the way I couldn't quite meet his gaze. "You went to the East Wing," he said quietly. Not a question, a statement. "I heard screaming," I whispered. "I thought someone was hurt. Someone was being questioned." He moved closer, and I backed up instinctively until I hit the wall. He kept coming until he stood directly in front of me, one hand braced against the wall beside my head, caging me in. "I gave you one rule, Emma. One. Don't go to the East Wing. That was for your protection, not mine." "Protection from what? From seeing who you really are?" His jaw tightened. "You know who I am. I've never pretended to be anything else. You're going to sell that woman. That woman's husband stole $3 million from me." His voice was still quiet, but there was steel beneath it now. $3 million that belongs to my family, that I earned, that pays for things like Sophia's security and your comfortable room and the food on our table. He betrayed my trust, and betrayal has consequences. "So you'll ruin her life? Send her to some horrible place. If she's lucky, I'll do exactly that. If she's not, she'll end up in the river with her husband." He leaned in closer, his breath warm against my face. "This is my world, Emma. It's brutal and violent and ugly. I don't apologize for it because apologizing changes nothing. I protect what's mine, and I destroy what threatens it. That's how I keep Sophia safe. That's how I'll keep you safe. I don't need—" "Yes, you do." His other hand came up to cup my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. "You walked into my world willingly. You took my money, accepted my hospitality, lived under my protection. Did you think that came without cost? Did you think I was some kind of reformed criminal playing at being civilized?" Tears burned my eyes. I thought maybe— What? That you could fix me? Save me? Make me into something softer? His laugh was bitter. "I am what I am, Emma. I've killed men with my own hands. I've done things that would give you nightmares for years. And I'll do worse to protect the people I care about. That includes Sophia. And whether you're ready to accept it or not, it includes you." "I want to leave," I whispered. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been pain if I didn't know better. "No, you don't. You want to run because you're scared. But you're not scared of me, Bella. You're scared of how much you want to stay despite what you've learned." That's not true, isn't it?" His thumb brushed across my lower lip, and I hated myself for the way my breath caught. "You've been alone for so long, Emma. Invisible. Working yourself to death in a place where no one knew your name, and now you're here, where someone sees you, where someone wants you, where a little girl adores you, and a dangerous man would burn the world down to keep you safe. Tell me you don't want that. Look me in the eyes and tell me you want to go back to your empty apartment, and your thankless job, and your invisible life." I opened my mouth to say exactly that, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. God help me. He was right. I can't be with someone who what? Who does terrible things to terrible people? Who lives in a world you've been sheltered from your entire life? The world doesn't run on kindness and good intentions, Emma. It runs on power. And I have power. I use it to protect my family, to provide for those under my care, and yes, to punish those who betray me. If that makes me a monster, then so be it. But I'm a monster who will worship you like a queen if you let me." His forehead pressed against mine, and I could feel the tension vibrating through his body. "Stay, please. I'm asking, not commanding. Stay with Sophia, who needs you. Stay with me, who wants you more than I've wanted anything in years. I swear to you, Emma, you'll never see that side of me again. I'll keep the darkness away from you. You and Sophia will live in the light while I handle the shadows." "That's not a solution," I said, but my voice was weak. "That's just pretending. Maybe. But isn't that what everyone does? We all have darkness inside us, Emma. Mine is just more literal than most. The question is, can you accept it? Can you accept me?" I closed my eyes, feeling tears slip down my cheeks. His thumbs caught them, wiping them away with a gentleness that contradicted everything I'd just heard in the East Wing. "I don't know," I whispered honestly. "Then let me show you." His lips brushed my forehead, soft and reverent. "Let me prove that I can be what you need. Give me a chance to show you that even monsters can love. Love." The word hung between us, huge and terrifying and impossibly tempting. "1 month," I heard myself say. "Give me 1 month to decide. No pressure, no manipulation. Just let me see if I can live with this, with you." He pulled back slightly, studying my face with those dark, intense eyes. Then slowly, he nodded. 1 month. But Emma, if you stay after that month, you're mine. Completely. No more doubts, no more running. You accept all of me, darkness and light. Deal? It was a devil's bargain. I knew it even as I whispered, "Deal." His smile was slow, dangerous, victorious. "Good. Now come. Sophia has been asking for you, and my daughter's happiness is the only thing I value more than your presence." He took my hand, and I let him lead me from the room, down the stairs, toward the sound of Sophia's laughter. As we walked, his hand warm and possessive around mine, I wondered if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. Or if, perhaps, I'd finally found the one place in the world where I belonged, even if that place was a beautiful cage beside a monster who looked at me like I was his salvation. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like falling, and I was no longer sure I wanted to be caught. The month passed like a dream, or perhaps a fever dream, where reality blurred with fantasy, and I could no longer tell which side of the mirror I stood on. Days followed a pattern that became almost comfortable. Mornings with Sophia, who bloomed under attention like a flower finally given sunlight. She taught me Italian words, stumbling over her explanations until we were both laughing. We baked cookies that came out burnt, but tasted like love anyway. I helped her with the lessons her private tutor assigned, watching her brilliant mind work through problems with a focus that reminded me painfully of her father. Afternoons I had to myself. I explored the grounds with guards trailing at a discreet distance, shadows I learned to ignore. I read books from Dante's library, losing myself in words that took me far from the gilded cage I'd chosen. Sometimes I sat in the gardens and simply existed, feeling the sun on my face, letting myself be still in a way I'd never been able to afford before. But nights belonged to Dante and the slow, inexorable pull of whatever was growing between us. He kept his word. He didn't push, didn't demand, but he was always there, a dark star around which I orbited helplessly. Dinners where his eyes held mine across the table while Sophia chattered between us, creating an intimacy that felt like a secret language only we spoke. Evenings where he'd find me reading and simply sit beside me, his presence both comforting and unsettling. Late nights on the terrace where we talked about everything except the question hanging between us like smoke. He told me about his childhood in Naples, the poverty that had shaped him, the violence that had claimed his father when he was 12. He spoke of building his empire from nothing, of the choices he'd made that couldn't be unmade, of the blood on his hands that would never wash clean. I told him about foster homes and disappointment, about learning to be invisible because visibility meant pain, about the loneliness that had become so familiar I'd almost mistaken it for peace. We circled each other like dancers learning a dangerous choreography, and with each passing day, I felt myself falling deeper into something I couldn't name and wasn't sure I'd survive. 3 weeks into the month, Marco pulled me aside after breakfast. "Miss Parker," a word. His scarred face was unreadable as always, but something in his tone made my stomach clench. I followed him to a small office I'd never entered before, and he closed the door with a finality that made the room feel suddenly smaller. "I'm going to tell you something I shouldn't," he said without preamble. "Because despite your innocence, you're not stupid, and you deserve to know what you're walking into. Marco, the name that woman gave us, Russo." He paused, his jaw tight. "That's my name, Miss Parker. I'm the only Russo in Mr. Valentino's organization." Ice flooded my veins. You're the one who... No." His voice was hard. "But someone is trying to make it look that way. Someone wants Mr. Valentino to believe I betrayed him. And if he believes it, He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Why are you telling me this? His cold eyes studied me for a long moment. Because he listens to you. Because you're the only person besides Sophia who can reach him when he's like this. And because if something happens to me, someone needs to protect her. Someone needs to make sure he doesn't let his rage destroy everything, including himself. I don't understand. Why would someone frame you? Because I'm the one person Mr. Valentino trusts completely. I've been with him since the beginning. I've saved his life, and he saved mine. If they can make him doubt me, they can make him doubt everyone. And a man who trusts no one is easier to kill. The implications crashed over me like a wave. Who would... I have theories, but no proof. Not yet. He moved toward the door, then paused. Watch him, Miss Parker. He's been different since you came. Softer, maybe. More human. But if he thinks I betrayed him, that softness will disappear. And what's underneath? He shook his head. Just watch him. And if something happens to me, don't let him destroy himself. He left me standing there, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer and fears I couldn't voice. That night, Dante seemed different. Tense. Distracted. At dinner, he barely touched his food, his eyes distant, his jaw tight. Sophia noticed, her chatter dying to uncertain silence as she glanced between us. After we put her to bed, I found him on the terrace, staring out at the darkness beyond the gardens, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and a gun on the table beside him. Dante, I said softly, and he turned to look at me with eyes that held more pain than I'd ever seen there. I may have to kill my best friend, he said quietly. The man who stood beside me for 15 years. The man who held my daughter when she was born. The evidence keeps pointing to him, and if he betrayed me, his hand tightened on the glass. I don't know if I can survive that, Emma. I don't know if there'll be anything left of me worth saving. I moved to him without thinking, my hand covering his on the railing. What if he didn't do it? What if someone's trying to make you believe he did? Why would anyone... He stopped, his eyes sharpening as he looked at me. What do you know? Marco talked to me. He told me someone's framing him. That someone wants you to doubt him because that's how they'll get to you. I squeezed his hand. He asked me to watch you, to not let you destroy yourself if something happens to him. Dante was silent for a long moment, his mind clearly working through possibilities, connections, implications. Then suddenly, he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. God, Emma, he murmured against my hair. What are you doing to me? I've spent years trusting no one, building walls no one could breach. And then you walk into my life with your kind eyes and your gentle heart. And suddenly I'm listening to feelings instead of evidence. You're making me weak. No, I said, my arms wrapping around him. I'm making you human. He pulled back, his hands framing my face, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that stole my breath. I love you, he said simply. I didn't mean to, didn't want to, but I do. And if someone is trying to tear apart my organization from the inside, I need to know I have something worth fighting for, someone worth staying human for. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dante, you don't have to say it back. I know your month isn't up, but I needed you to know. Whatever happens in the next few days, whatever you see or hear, remember that. I love you, and I will do whatever it takes to keep you and Sophia safe. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression went cold, that terrifying coldness I'd heard in the East Wing. They're here, he said flatly. My enemies finally made their move. Marco was right. This was a setup to make me vulnerable. He looked at me, and for just a moment I saw fear flash across his face. Emma, listen carefully. Go to Sophia's room. There's a panic room behind her closet, the far left wall. Press the rose carved into the wood. Take her inside and don't come out until Marco or I come for you. Do you understand? What's happening? Armed men just breached the west gate. This was all planned. Turn me against Marco, thin out my security, then attack when I'm isolated and paranoid. He grabbed the gun from the table, checking it with practiced ease. Go, now. I need to know you're both safe so I can do what needs to be done. Fear paralyzed me for a moment, but then training I didn't know I had kicked in. Survival instincts honed by years of living on the edge. I ran. Sophia's room. The closet. The carved rose that clicked under my fingers. The wall swung open, revealing a small room with supplies, monitors showing security feeds, and a phone connected to emergency services. Sophia woke as I grabbed her, confused and frightened. "Emma? What's happening?" "We're playing hide-and-seek with your papa," I lied, carrying her into the panic room. "We have to be very quiet, okay?" Through the monitors, I watched hell unfold. Men in black, faces covered, moving through the gardens with military precision. Gunfire erupting like deadly fireworks. Dante's guards engaging the intruders, falling, fighting, dying to protect the house. And in the center of it all, Dante himself, moving with a lethal grace I'd never seen, no longer the sophisticated businessman, but a predator in his element, every shot finding its mark, every movement calculated and brutal. This was who he really was, not the gentle father or the seductive lover, but a man forged in violence, who wielded death like an artist wielded a brush. And I couldn't look away. Marco appeared on the screens, fighting back-to-back with Dante, their movements synchronized from years of partnership. They fought their way toward the house, toward us, cutting down enemies with a ruthless efficiency that should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself whispering, "Please, please let them be okay," because somewhere in the past month, this had become my home. These people had become my family. And the dangerous man fighting his way through an army to protect us had become mine. The realization hit me like a bullet. I loved him. Not despite his darkness, but including it. I loved the monster and the man, the violence and the gentleness, the fear he inspired and the safety he provided. I loved Dante Valentino completely, and that terrified me more than any threat outside these walls. It took 30 minutes that felt like hours. 30 minutes of gunfire and screams and prayers I didn't know I remembered. And then, finally, silence. The monitors showed bodies scattered across the gardens, most in black, some in suits. Dante stood in the center of it all, blood on his shirt, gun still in his hand, looking for all the world like an avenging angel, cast out of heaven for loving too fiercely. Marco said something to him, gesturing toward the house. Toward us. They came together, their footsteps echoing through the quiet house. I heard them outside the panic room, heard Dante's voice calling my name. "Emma, it's over. You can come out." I pressed the release, and the door swung open. Dante stood there, covered in blood and gunpowder residue, his eyes wild until they landed on me and Sophia. Then something in him crumbled, and he fell to his knees, reaching for us. "You're safe," he breathed. "Thank God you're safe." Sophia, surprisingly, wasn't crying. She looked at her father with a solemnity beyond her years. "You protected us, Papa, like always. Always, Piccola, always." His eyes found mine over Sophia's head, and what I saw there made my decision crystallize into absolute certainty. "I love you," I said clearly. "My month isn't up, but I don't need it. I love you, Dante. All of you. The parts that terrify me and the parts that make me feel safe. I love you, and I'm staying. Not because I'm trapped, but because I choose this. I choose you." Something broke in his expression, relief and joy, and a vulnerability so raw it hurt to witness. "Emma." "But," I continued, my voice stronger now, "if I'm staying, then I'm really staying. I'm not hiding in panic rooms while you fight alone. I'm not pretending the violence doesn't exist. I want to know everything. I want to understand your world so I can stand beside you in it, not behind you. Can you give me that?" He stood slowly, still holding Sophia, his free hand reaching for me. "You want to see the monster completely. I want to see my partner completely. There's a difference." His smile was slow and devastating. "Then I'll show you everything. The empire I built, the enemies I've made, the power I wield, and the price I've paid for it. And when you've seen it all, if you still love me, then you'll truly be mine, my partner, my equal, my salvation." Marco cleared his throat from the doorway. "Sir, we should probably deal with the bodies before the sun comes up. And there are some survivors in the holding room who are very eager to tell us who sent them. Let them wait, Dante said, his eyes never leaving mine. This is more important. He shifted Sophia to one hip and pulled me close with his other arm, the three of us forming a unit, broken pieces fitting together into something whole. Blood and violence and love tangled together in a way that should have been wrong, but felt perfect. Welcome home, Bella, he murmured against my hair. Welcome to the darkness and the light. Welcome to the cage you chose, the family you've become part of, the love that will both save and damn us. Welcome to forever. I kissed him then, tasting blood and whiskey, and tomorrow, sealing the choice I'd made. Not the safe choice, not the easy one, but mine. Sophia giggled between us. Does this mean Emma is my mama now? Dante looked at me, a question in his eyes that held every promise and threat and dream we'd circled around for weeks. Yes, I said softly. If that's okay with you, sweetheart. Yay! She threw her small arms around both our necks, completing the circle, binding us together in a way that felt unbreakable. Later, after Sophia was asleep again, and the bodies were cleared, and the survivors were singing like canaries in the holding room, Dante took me to the terrace one last time. The sun was rising, painting the gardens in gold and pink, hiding the blood that had been spilled in the darkness. They were sent by the Castellano family, he said quietly. They thought Marco's betrayal had fractured my organization. They were wrong. All they did was show me what I had to lose if I let paranoia destroy the bonds that actually matter. What happens now? His smile was cold and final. Now I remind them why people fear the Valentino name. But that's tomorrow's work. Tonight. He turned to me, his hands gentle as they cupped my face. Tonight, I have everything I ever wanted. A daughter who's safe, an enemy who's exposed, and a woman who looked at my darkest self and chose to stay. I'm not an angel, Dante, I said, echoing Sophia's words from that first night. I'm just as broken as you are, just better at hiding it. Then we'll be broken together, he whispered. And maybe, somehow, that will make us whole. He kissed me as the sun rose over his kingdom of shadows and silk, his empire built on violence and maintained through fear. He kissed me like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning. And I kissed him back, accepting every part of him, the monster, the man, the father, the lover. I'd entered his world as an invisible waitress with nothing to lose. I stood in it now as Emma Valentino, a name I'd take in a private ceremony 6 months later, with Sophia as our flower girl and Marco as best man, binding myself forever to a man who'd shown me that even in darkness, love could bloom. Some cages, I learned, weren't prisons at all. Some cages were homes. And some monsters were just men who loved so fiercely they'd burn the world down to keep what was theirs safe. I was his. He was mine. And together, we were unbreakable. The invisible girl had finally been seen, and she would never be invisible again.